Hey, podcast listeners. Today I will be speaking with Sharisse Zeroonian. Sharisse is a filmmaker in the Boston area where she writes, directs, produces films, feature films. She's done a feature film, a few shorts, and a television series that she's working on that she just shot the pilot for. So she's a very talented person, and it's great to hear stories like this because we often complain as independent filmmakers of lack of opportunity or ability to get Hollywood to recognize us. And you can't do that. You can't wait for Hollywood to come knocking on your door because no matter how brilliant you think you are, there's hundreds of thousands of other just as brilliant people out there doing the same thing. And so if you're not going to make your films, they're not going to get made. And that's exactly what Sharisse has done. And so it's really fantastic to hear her story about how she's gone about doing some of her projects, some of the lessons that she's learned, mistakes that she's made, what she learned from those mistakes, how she improved upon her filmmaking for the next project. And so that's pretty much it. I'm not going to do a big long intro this time around. I'm just going to say, stay tuned for Sharisse Zeroonian.
I can't help but feel good. I can't help but feel fine.
Sharisse Zeroonian. No.
Sharisse.
Sharisse.
Yeah, it's like Therese, but with the sh.
Sharisse.
Yeah.
Say it a few times, I might get it.
Yeah. I can't think of anything it really rhymes with, so I would tell you, but
no worries. I'll have it. I'll get it.
yeah.
Okay, well, it's great to talk to you.
You too.
And you're in Boston, right?
I'm in Boston, yeah.
Okay. Are you originally from Boston?
Yeah, I was born in Boston, and okay. I grew up nearby, so.
So do a lot of Bostonians have like that accent that we associate with Bostonians from movies?
Yeah, some of them really do. Like I had some like teachers and stuff in school growing up where they were just like, some of them will be like, no, like you can't go in there. You can't go in there. Like, okay, kindergartners, first graders, another thing with Boston, like I guess any other major city, is like it's home to a lot of immigrants and stuff. So, sometimes when like they come from other countries or like your parents come from other countries like mine did, like, and you might not, they don't have that accent. So like you just grow up kind of talking the way they talk and it kind of like melts together with the regional accent, so you never get a full, like I never went full like park the car in half a yard because neither of my parents are from the US, so
right. Okay. Where are your parents from?
They're from Iran, but they're Armenian. There's a lot of Armenians in Iran. There's like a whole, like Armenians migrated for a lot of reasons, like across the Middle East and Russia and stuff. So they came here like after the Iranian Revolution.
Okay.
So that's why I didn't go full like Matt Damon and Good Will Hunting. That's why I sound like this. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I was usually expect. But it's funny because like other people I talk to from the East Coast as well, like Boston and others, they don't have the accent either. And it's like I have yet to actually meet a person that has that stereotypical Boston accent that we expect to hear.
I meet them all the time. It's usually people like whose family's been here for like 3-4 generations. Like they got the old time accent where like they sound like the Kennedys or like, you can't do this.
Oh, yeah.
But it's funny because in my web series, which I know we're going to talk about, Sandbox Police, it's, I wanted this character to be like very far from me because I feel like a lot of stuff I do is like, takes place in like the Northeast or Mass. And I thought, okay, I want this character to be from California. So I had to kind of like be cognizant of certain things. Like I couldn't say aunt anymore. I just say aunt, like while referring to like I would naturally say aunt and uncle because that's how people here say it. But I just say like aunt and uncle. And I couldn't say things like I couldn't say RMV. Because we say Registry of Motor Vehicles, it's not Department of Motor Vehicles. But I say like DMV and stuff like that. Or like kind of I really had to like erase a lot of the East Coast isms. Well, I did have my characters. I said like her mom was from New Hampshire, just to explain away any like sometimes I'll accidentally drop R's sometimes. Like the other day I said like beta or something. I was like, oh my God, like it's happening. Like the transition into Paktakan Havadiyat is happening. So I was trying to like, I explained it away like, oh, like her like mom's from New Hampshire. That's why she doesn't sound like a surfer.
Nice little addition to the script. Oh yeah, our mother's from, yeah, that's why we get that. Well, let's start before we get to the web series. Let's back it up a little bit. And so you're a writer, an author, and a filmmaker. Yes. So what got you into filmmaking?
Well, it was kind of, you know, some people like they kind of know what they want to be like from the get-go. I was definitely not like that. But I'd always had a great aptitude for anything that was like humanities, like arts related, and especially literary stuff. Like I come from film from a writing background. Like dialogue in the script is like the most important thing to me. It's the most, you know, it's what I concentrate most on when I watch other films or TV shows too. I started reading very early, and like when I was in like preschool, I used to read to my friends and they would all like gather around, and I used to write like little stories. Like in kindergarten, I loved like when it was time for writer's workshop, and I would like write a story. And when I was in first grade, I went on another radio show recently, and I can't believe I forgot to tell this story, but I will tell it now. It's when I was in first grade, we had to write a story for an assignment, and I wrote one. It was right after Thanksgiving, and I wrote about what Thanksgiving had been like that year for my family, which is now that year, 2002 in Boston, there's a huge blizzard on Thanksgiving. Like we got like 6 feet of snow or something. And I remember that very vividly. I remember going sledding with my neighbors after like helping my dad cook. So I wrote about that, and my teacher came up to me and said like, come over here. And I thought I was in trouble because I was constantly in trouble. At that age, I was like, oh my God, like, is this about, you know, what I did in the cafeteria the other day? Like, uh-oh, like, I'm going to get it now. And she goes, no, come over here. You're not in trouble. And I go, that's a first. I'm not in trouble. And she was like, come on, we're going to go to the principal's office. And I go, all right, now you're freaking me out. Why are we going to the principal's office if I'm not in trouble? She's like, no. We're going to call your mom and read her this story because I think the story is so good that I want you to read it to your mom. And I was like, okay, is this like, am I on punked? Like, what is this? Like, but no, we really went to the principal's office so I could call my mom and read that story. And I remember feeling like, this is very weird. Like, I didn't think it was I was just like, okay, like, I didn't think it was a particularly like earth shattering thing, even at the age of 7. But I thought, well, you know, maybe I could be good at this.
Do you still have that story?
No, I don't. I wish I did. It's probably like in the depths of like my basement or something, like in the dusty abyss of my basement. Yeah, that was one of the most important, I guess, defining moments, what made me want to write. When I was a kid, I used to write like little poems and things, or like little stories about like my stuffed animal. I wrote a story for like a school newspaper about my stuffed animals going on a trip to San Francisco, because I'd gone to San Francisco recently. So not recently, well, recently then. And I thought, yeah, this would be a great story. And I just really liked it. And when I got older, I would write stories, but I would imagine them as movies in my head. And now I had also gotten into maybe like 12, 13. I had gotten into like actually using a camera. Like my parents had a camcorder, and you couldn't take that thing out of my hands for like a few years. I always like had it, and I was like, I would film like family events and things. And like I also learned to edit when I was 12. And video edit.
Yeah, I would say, how did you edit? Like, so when you were 12, would that would have been on computer editing, or?
It was. No, that was half a lifetime ago for me. I'm 24, so it was not. It was
so not
on the computer.
So roughly, 12 years ago. So
yeah.
Okay. So yeah, all right. Sorry, when I think when I was 12, like, that was like VHS days and stuff. Yeah.
No, it's like. It was on the computer. And when people say now, like actual film editing, like when you cut up the film, like I can't fathom that. So like when you have to actually cut the little piece of film together, I was like, what? How do people do that? But no, I did it on Windows Movie Maker, which is like, it comes with your computer. It's the most primitive, like awful thing. Like now after using like all the advanced stuff, I've gone back to it. I've been like, how did I do this? This is terrible. Like you can do 2 functions on it. And it's just, it's like more primitive than iMovie, and that's saying something. But like,
yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah,
I enjoyed it, and I used to put like music on them. I used to put like captions on them. We had like a bouncy. I still have this one. We had like a bouncy house for my brother's birthday, but it was like I pulled the plug while he was in it. No, actually, no, he pulled the plug while I was in it. That was the prank. Like we made a movie out of it. And like he tried to climb in it, and I put like captions on it saying like, "Oh no, it's the monster," or like something, and like I made like a movie out of it. It was just so fun. I thought that kind of stuff was fun to just put it together. So I started doing that. I never considered it like as a career really though. Like I had thought about it, but I was like, and everybody was telling me like, the same old stuff that people often hear. It's like, what are you going to do with that as a career? Or like, you don't live in New York or LA, so what's the point? And then it's funny because I went to college to originally become a teacher, and that didn't work out for a variety of reasons. I mean, I love kids. I love working with kids, but teaching itself, I'm sure a lot of artists and creative people know this, like traditional schooling and artistry or creativity don't usually mix well.
That was my schooling experience. My artistry didn't mix well with the traditional education system.
There's a lot of people's schooling experience. It's funny. I was an after school teacher actually. For the past, I stopped this year, but I was an after school teacher for a little bit, and it reinforced how much like why I did not have a good time in an education program, because it was very much like, if you don't teach it meat, you can't have any pudding, like Pink Floyd in the wall, like, and it was again, it's funny because I think the best teachers are the ones who are out of the box, but sadly those are the ones who end up being like vilified by their own department or like ostracized because they're different stuff. And I was like, yeah, but I went out of that education program, and I forgot to say I started college in 2014. I graduated in 2018 as a film major because I switched a couple times. I majored a couple times, and I sort of denied myself the chance to do film and writing. And I thought, why not? I'll be happier. My grades won't be in the toilet. So like, yeah, let's try. And I was much happier when I switched. I took a lot of courses that really changed my life with like certain professors. Like I took a course on indie film. And that's what I think really started me actually making serious films, because a lot of the films that we were shown were things like, we watched like some of John Cassavetes' movies, which he made with Not a Ton of Money. He made Outside the System. We watched films like early films that Greta Gerwig was in that were filmed with like a little rinky-dinky camcorder. And that's what really said to me, because before going in to this program, I was like most Americans really, who are like, oh my God, like if it's not a $5 million blockbuster, it's not legit. Indie film, who wants to watch that? Da, da, da. And then once I actually took the course, and these movies, some of them were really beautiful, and they impacted me emotionally. And I thought, you know what, this it made me feel like I could do it, because I thought I don't have to wait for someone to drop $1 million on my head. Like I can start now. And so I did. I started making some films with literally just using all the like just things I had at home. And I made like a little micro short film, Big People Talking, which I just made literally like the toys in my room. That's all it was. And it I put it in a festival on a whim, and it played in the festival, and it like was another festival, and it got like honorable mention at one, which it's not the same as being played, but it's not an outright rejection. And then I made a feature. No, a 37-minute film. I don't know if I would call it a feature, but it
depends on the festival. Like a lot of festivals nowadays, you needs to be, I think, under 20 minutes to be considered a short. And so that's in that like no man's land of depending on the festival.
Well, then I guess I would call it a feature, a short feature. And I made another one. And again, there's nothing wrong with making films with a lot of money. I would love it if someone dropped $1 million on my head, but no one's going to do that. So I just used what I had, but there is some honor in it, like to just, and there's a lot of respect for I have a lot of respect for people like that who just use their like ingenuity and their creativity and their resourcefulness to do stuff with what they have. So
yeah, well, that's the great thing about now the world that we currently live in, is the fact that people can do that. I mean, you've got access to cameras, you've got access to sound equipment, you've got access to computers with editing, and so you don't need a big budget film production in order to make something decent, and that's the great thing. Exactly.
Yeah, and I've seen films that had like a real like stellar production values, but the film itself had like no substance, or it was like a recycled story, and it was like, come on, like. And I've had some actors I've worked with who, I mean, if you want to get into said stories, like filming my my actual long feature that is about an hour and 6 minutes long. It's called The Mouse and the Bread. And I don't know, as far as language goes on this podcast, like, can I say
you can swear all you want? Yes,
it was a complete shit show.
Yeah.
Production. Like, we had like I had like, well, the first day, like, my tripod got stolen on the train when I was taking. I didn't have a car at the time.
Did you see the person stealing it, or
no?
did it
What happened was, it was I don't even know what happened. Like, it was next to me on the train, and I sat next to this guy, and like, I'm like a nice person, so like I'll sit next to people if they're like alone and stuff. And I like seem to be a magnet for like crazy like conspiracy theorists, because like this guy started talking to me and he wouldn't stop, and he was talking like all sorts of crazy things. He was like, young lady, did you know that Abraham Lincoln was in a secret society to control the world? And I was like, and I didn't want to like upset him by like not listening.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, well, I didn't know that. I've never heard that. I'm like, and so I'm trying, like, I'm like, like, I hope I don't get like murdered by this guy, like, in front of all these people. And it was time to get off. He wouldn't even stop talking because it was like time for me to get off. So I was like, all right, bye-bye. And I was so distracted. And I'd like 15 pounds of like other equipment with me, like my camera and like my bags and things. And I realized my tripod wasn't there. And I was like, And then I went down to the station like a week later, and nobody returned the tripod. So we had to use like, I think we had to use like a table or books or something to like, for one of the scenes shot in the bedroom. And it was a disaster. Like, I had I had so many like meltdowns during the production of that. Like, there was one day where, and look, I as I said before in like other interviews and like on my social media, like, I'm not the type of person to like doll up the realities of what it means to be a filmmaker who's working with very little, and very little resources. I'm not going to make it sound like it's the best, it's going to be completely all roses in this. I'm not interested in that. So I'm going to say it was so tough to film that. Like, people say like, what was the budget for this? I'm like, it was probably like $20. Like, I was using like my DSLR to film, and it was just beautiful picture quality, but like the sound quality is dog shit. Like,
you were recording sound directly into the camera?
Yeah, I had an external mic, but it was so bad. Like, it was a type you had to get really, really close for it to work, and no actor's going to be like this with the camera like leaning into the mic. So we couldn't do that, and like we had somebody else brought an external mic, but again, that one wasn't great either. And so we were like, all right, fine, maybe I'll fix it in post, which seems to be the mantra for like most like student filmmakers. Like, I'll fix it in post.
Yep.
And I tried very hard to fix it in post. Like, my boyfriend, God bless him, he's a sound engineer at a radio station. Even he was like, I can't. Like, he's like, he's very talented, production person. He like does commercials and stuff, but he's like, I can't work with this. Like, it's just beyond anything anybody could do. And it was like, because we had to film outside, you could hear like birds chirping and stuff. Yeah. And it was like, we had to film. It's funny, there's scenes in it that were filmed in the apartment that I lived in before I lived in my current house. I lived in Cambridge, Mass until I was 3, and then I moved to Belmont, Mass, which is where I live now, which is very close to Boston. And it's it was my apartment that we lived in. My parents, like, they rented it. They still rent it out to people, but at that time it was empty, so we used it to film. And we had like, I think it was our air conditioning unit that was making a lot of noise, and like we couldn't turn it off. Like, it was 90 degrees. Nobody wanted to do that. Not that I knew how. Like, I certainly didn't want to like draw my parents' ire by like messing with something and not knowing it. But like, you can hear like from the air conditioning, and like you can hear the dialogue, but we had to do some like crazy things with the dialogue to compensate for it in post. And it was like, sometimes it just like, the sound almost sounds like robotic. Like, it's like, I don't know, like, it almost sounds auto-tuned in like for like 2 lines of it. And I was like, ugh, like, what can you do? And now again, some people like would overlook things like this. I'm willing to overlook things like that if, the story is compelling enough and if the dialogue is good enough, because that's what's most important to me. But some people were very rude about it. Like, I had a screening of Mouse and the Bread. it was in, and I don't do physical screenings anymore, certainly not now because of COVID, but I had a few. Some were well attended and some really were not. And there's this one disastrous screening in Providence where one person showed up.
Oh.
One person, it was in a library, and it was a branch of the Providence Public Library. And this one guy showed up, and I said, fine, okay, we'll give him a private screening, like whatever. And so we did, and at the end, and he was just, I'm like, so what did you think? And this guy was just such a, I told the story of this on my personal vlog channel on YouTube. This guy was just such an asshole. Like it's not because he didn't like it, like that's fine, this is opinion, but like he was contradicting himself constantly. He's like, oh, film today it's too homogenous. We see too much the same things, but it shouldn't look like this. This is way too different. I'm like, and then he goes, the film, it's very raw, it's very raw, and we need to see more raw films, but not like this. It's like, what do you make up your mind, dude? And he was like, and he kind of admitted to like having no life outside of like coming to the library and just like hanging around and watching films. Like, I come here to watch films all the time. I'm always here. And like, he said, like, I've seen, this one really pissed me off. He was like, I've seen films at youth film festivals that were more advanced than this. I'm like, okay, so you mean like a 13-year-old whose parents threw like $6,000 at him? I mean, come on. I kind of eviscerated him a little bit, let's say. Like, I was trying to, and I wasn't like screaming at him, but I was like very passionately telling him, like, okay, like if you think this, and why don't you give me the money? Why don't you, that's my response to people. Like, if you want to be an asshole, if you feel it should be the same way, then give the artist the money to make a film.
Or make a better film yourself. Like, that's the one I always think that's funny, is people are so critical, and it's like, well, until you make something better, you probably shouldn't criticize. Yeah.
Well, one of my films, Well Water, which it definitely gets trashed less than Mouse in the Bread. I mean, maybe because it's less of a mind fucking. And I've heard people say like, I've had people who really like Mouse in the Bread. I've had people say like, it impacted them emotionally. It reminded them of, conflicts going on in their life where, they felt the same way as the characters and they could relate to it. They could relate to someone who feels different or alienated and, like as a main character does. And it impacts a lot of people. That's another thing I've said to people when they say, I couldn't relate to this film. I go, okay, I'm very glad your life has been so good that you can't relate to someone being bullied or someone being in a bad marriage or someone, not having friends. Like, God bless you. If that's been your life, that's awesome. And you're probably not the right viewer. But
so what did you take from that film in regards to what did you learn that you brought onto your next film to make the next one better?
I probably learned to stress a little less, like, because there was a moment, and I'm really not proud of it, but like I was just one day, I didn't have transportation other than the train to get to, it was the train station and then the house where we were filming. And I had like, I don't know what it was about the production of this film, but like I had, at least during the production, like 3 different actors, like their aunts all died and they had to go to the funeral. They're like, I'm sorry, my aunt passed away. I can't film today. I was like, oh, that's fine. They're like, and 1 week later, I'm sorry, my aunt passed away. It was a different actor. Like people, I don't know what it was about this film. It was like cursed. Like people's aunts kept dying. I don't know why I'm laughing at that. It was, what are the odds?
Maybe they just wanted the day off and they were like, well, the aunt excuse worked last weekend for the other person, so I'm going to use it this weekend for my,
That's right. Yeah, I didn't think of that. But like, no, but of course, like, because I'm not a jerk most of the time. I was like, no, that's fine. It's totally fine.
You can't not like,
I understand. So like we had to scramble to get replacements or we had to write that person's scene out. And then like, I had like, it was like a very hot day. I had like a bunch of equipment with me. I had no help out by myself. And I kind of like melted down and I started like texting people in a fury because like the person whose house we were using wasn't answering his phone. And I don't mean to sound like I'm, like bitching about them or anything. Like they did a lot for us. They opened their home to us and like we kind of had to disrupt their family life a little bit. And I'm very grateful to them. But it's just a fact. They weren't answering their phone that day. And I was feeling really stressed out and I started melting down, texting people like, why is no one helping me? Da-da-da, you're not helping me. I got to do this by myself. Da-da-da. And I I made some people really upset, and I felt so bad about it. And because I know I don't normally act like that, I was just very, very stressed out. And projects I've done after that, I definitely felt a little less stressed. But I think it's because I had more means. Like when I did my TV pilot, I just wrapped up the production for. I definitely had more means to do that, and definitely shows. Like I work with a company out of Rockland, Massachusetts, which is for those who don't know, it's a bit far. It's a bit far from Boston. It's southern Massachusetts, and it's they're a great company. And they stellar equipment, great production values, and great people. And I had a ton of help, and I had a legit crew for that one. Like with Mouse and the Bread, it was like me and 2 friends who were like maybe available. Some days, like we had to have actors take turns with the camera. Like that's how bad how much of a shit show it was. And again, I'm not dissing the actors at all. They stepped up when they had to, and I'm glad that they were willing to do that. Like just anyone who works with me knows I'm not known for organization. I have ADHD, I'll say it. I didn't know it at the time. I got diagnosed later, but I struggled forever. And it definitely comes out when I work. Like I'm not the most on top of things. There definitely will be like missing materials when you work with me. We had one day, I didn't have a memory card for my camera. I left it in my computer at home, I think, or something. Or I left it in, this little case, my different camera bag. And so one of the actor's husbands, God bless him, he went out and he got a memory card from CVS and he brought it in the middle of production. It's things like that where I'm like, you're the real MVP. Like, it's awesome.
That's nice when you can find people that help.
Also, I felt so bad. It was like, I shouldn't, like, why do people pick up my slack? And that's something I feel guilty about all the time in a lot of areas of my life, not just film. And it's something I really try not to let stuff like that show, but it's hard. It's not, it's my control. But but it always we end up having a good time. I think I've learned to stress a little less over the process and focus more on the results. I think definitely, because even if the process doesn't go right, like in the end, you make something and people have a good time. At least, they said they had a good time. They could just be humoring me, but no, we had a lot of fun.
Okay. Well, tell me about the TV pilot. So what is that project and what's it like working with a proper crew compared to having to just kind of do everything yourself?
Oh, well, it's great. And there's still some stuff I do myself, like casting, which is the bane of my existence for every production. It's the worst. For me, it's my least favorite part is casting and auditioning, just because it's so much.
How do you find actors? Yeah, like where do you find actors, or how do you?
Social media is a blessing for these things, because like I go on. Well, for Wellwater, for that one, because it was a film I made in college. I was using this thing. It was a special database that was available specifically to the film students. It would connect film students at BU, Boston University, for people listening. It connected the student filmmakers to people in the Boston area who were actors and looking for work.
Okay.
And I tried to hold an in-person casting call on campus, which you can do, but there are so many problems. Like, we asked the department for a room and they said, oh, I'm sorry, you can't have this room anymore because we're going to give it to someone else for a function. So I had to move rooms like 3 times, and then we finally had to do it in like a couch in one of the the college communication buildings. And that was a nightmare. So I said, no more in person, we're doing video audition. And it was slightly easier to do a video audition. Like I would send people like a monologue and I would ask them to read it, and then I would judge who I thought was the best. Yeah, that's how I found my actors.
And that's how you cast. So what's the TV pilot? What's the name of it? Is that 1+2?
1+1 is 2.
Yeah, that's right. 1 plus 1 is 2, right?
It's 2. Yes.
Okay. So that's the TV pilot. So your actors for that, you did virtual auditions for that?
I did, yeah. And that one, because I was out of school, I had no longer had access to the BU database. So what I did was there's sites all over Facebook. I'm sure that every major city has their own version of this, but in Boston and around Massachusetts, there's a group called Boston Actors. There's a group called Hollywood East. There's a group called like New England Actors. And all you got to do, I remember like when I was casting Mouse and the Bread, I I sent out, I remember it was like right as I was getting on a plane. I had literally sent from my phone, like, friends, I'm looking for actors that fit this description, this demographic, this age, da 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 da, early 20s, late 20s, late 50s, and I posted it. I turned off my phone. When I landed in Florida, I opened my phone. I turn on my phone. I open Facebook because the first thing you do, when you land is, to let people know you cheated death, as I do. And I was doing that. I opened Facebook. I had I think close to 60 notifications. Like, I want to be in it. Here's my reel. And I was like, oh, what have I done?
Well, that's great though.
Yeah, it is great. But I was like, oh dear, I got all these reels, and keeping track of it was really difficult because it's like, you send something to one person, but they're like, oh, I didn't get this. Can you send it again? Because it got buried in my emails. Or I had another weird thing where I would send screenshots of different pages, but for some reason Google, even when you send things in order, Gmail sometimes I don't know, when you attach pictures, sometimes they don't always show up in the wrong order. So I had people in their auditions, sometimes for 1+1 is 2, it happens a lot, they would read the pages out of order, and I'm like, that's not how it's supposed to go. And they were like, oh, sorry, this is the way it looked when I opened the attachments in Google. Instead of pick 1, pick 2, pick 3, it would for some reason attach as pick 2, pick 3, pick 1. So that was a whole journey. I've had some really talented actors, and I was blessed to have the actors I've worked with. I feel like I make good choices in terms of casting. And I've had people say, you're not using professionals. It's so what? I mean, all I need is someone who can read not read the lines like Stephen Hawking, and, can convey the emotions well enough.
Yeah.
And if it's someone who I fit, that'll be good. I mean, there have been times where I will, for example, 1+1 is 2 was very tricky to cast because it goes throughout time. It goes from the 60s to, the year 2018, which is when it takes place, to the 70s. And so you got to get the child versions of an actor who's 50, of a character who's 58 years old now. You got to get the 17-year-old version. You got to get the 5-year-old version. So I had to make sure I was picking actors and actresses who plausibly looked enough like the older or the younger versions, just so it makes sense. And I sent out an email. I was picking little girls for the role of, I think, the 9 to 12-year-old version of the main character's daughter. And I sent out, because I knew, if I was 12 years old and I got a rejection, I would probably been very upset. And I sent out something saying, but for this one, it was down to 3 actresses. And I said, I liked you all. I saw, you all were really gifted actresses. But unfortunately, because I had to pick, I picked this actress because she looked like the grown-up version. That's all it was. So if I didn't pick you, doesn't mean I don't like you or that you're not talented. It's just that, I needed someone with light brown hair, but I couldn't have someone with jet black hair or red hair, for example.
Yeah.
Or I cast, for the pilot, I had cast the main character's husband and his sister. They were supposed to be twins in the original story. And I had cast originally an actress who plausibly looked like she could be the female twin of this actor, but she dropped out 2 days before you're supposed to film. I was like, oh, thanks. So, but I picked the next most talented actress. Looked nothing like him. She's blonde and she doesn't look like him. But I thought, she's really talented. And I thought she said her lines well. And I said, you know what? I'll take her. Why not? Maybe they'll be brother and sister, but they won't be twins anymore.
With the pilot, how did you get involved with this production company? How did they find you, or did you find them?
I found them.
Did you take the story to them and say, hey, I want to do this. Will you produce it? What was that process?
I took the pilot script to them, and I told them what it was about. I'll say what the story's about now. It took place in 1968 in Massachusetts. And the main character is a woman named Marielle Morin, who, and I have to always stress, she's a fictional character. People ask if she's a real historical figure. I say, no, I made this person up entirely. Everything in this is it's people I made up. And Marielle Morin in 1968 was 28 years old. She was a wife, she was a mother, and she was just a stay-at-home mom. But as a kid in the 40s and 50s, she struggled a lot in school. Back then, they had no way to diagnose disabilities. You would call her dyslexic today. She struggled like reading and writing and things like that. And so she had to drop out of school, and she went on to like work at a supermarket before getting married and having her daughter. And so now she's in 1968, she's a stay-at-home mom, and at that time, only 1 in 5 kids with disabilities would go to school. And, the other 4 who were able enough to go were not treated well. Not that they're treated super well now, but back then it was way worse. They were like completely closed off from the rest of the student body. And it was just, it was very much, it was not what it is today. And so she and some other parents in the area in Cambridge, they live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which I picked because many people don't know this, but one of the first schools to practice integration of kids with disabilities and kids who don't have disabilities was in Cambridge in 1972, I think, the Haggerty School. So it's a famous school for that reason. That's why I picked Cambridge. And also because nobody knows where Belmont, Massachusetts is. That's where I live. But anyway, so yeah, in Cambridge. So she gets a bunch of parents together from Cambridge, Massachusetts, and neighboring cities and towns in Massachusetts to start a grassroots movement. They do like rallies and protests, and they like talk to the administrations to like see what they can do to improve and increase education, access to public education. But she becomes so obsessed with her cause that it starts to take her a toll on her family and, her relationships with her friends. And because part of it is like, she is a benevolent character. She really does want to help, but her motives aren't entirely altruistic, because part of it is because she wants to avenge the way she was treated as a kid. Like, she wasn't treated well by her dad, growing up, or her sister. I mean, she had a great relationship with her mom, but not with her dad and her sister. Like, they made fun of her a lot, and like she was bullied in school and stuff like that. So she's like, okay, I want to be on top now. But that desire to be on top, it like, she goes so far with it that like, it affects her marriage. It affects, her parenting. It affects her friendships. It just kind of shows what happens when like an activist is not, a complete hero. Like when they mess up a lot and they are not completely sympathetic. So that was the play. But the TV version now takes place. It's very expensive to film something all in like the period, the historical drama, because you got to get old cars and old clothes and things for the whole thing. It's just very expensive. So it's set in 2018, and Marielle by this time is 78 years old. And at this point now, she's a grandmother, she's a great-grandmother, and she's had a whole career behind her in advocacy, special education advocacy, all that. And she's become a really prominent figure in this movement. So her daughter, who's 57 at the time it starts, and her husband are writing a book about her life and her legacy. But the story really focuses on, because when you're writing a book about someone, a biography of someone, and especially like if it's like someone close to you, you got to tell, the whole truth, like the good, the bad, and the ugly. So as they're writing, the show goes back and forth in time to examine like the mistakes she made as a parent and a spouse and a friend, and also like the victories, like the triumphs she had in these areas and the good things she did. It focuses mostly on parenting, like as a topic, like how moms and dads and kids too can make mistakes, and sometimes they hurt each other, and what does it mean to be a parent? What does it mean to repeat the patterns? That's another big thing. You see a lot of the same behaviors repeat, like a lot of people repeating the same behaviors that their parents did. Like a lot of characters do that.
Have you filmed the whole pilot, or just? Yeah. Okay, so you did film the pilot.
We filmed the pilot and not the other episodes yet, because what we're hoping to do is sell the pilot so it can get.
That's great. So so you're currently in the process of trying to sell the pilot.
Yes.
Okay.
But people can watch the trailer. I do not have the whole pilot publicly available.
Yep. Well, and I'll make sure to throw a link to the trailer in the show notes.
There's an Indiegogo for it, and the trailer is part of that too. So.
Oh, perfect. Okay, I'll put that in there. So, and then just real quickly, what's Sandbox Police?
Sandbox Police is my web series that my friends and I filmed because we're in a pandemic right now. It's filmed over Zoom.
Okay.
And it had started out live action. Like we didn't start filming it live action. I'd written it to be a live action show. Like I was hoping, at some point to get an actual podcast studio or a radio station and film it in there. But when this happened, I was like, okay, it's going to be a long time before we get to film anything live action again. So why don't we might as well use Zoom? But I had to change the premise a little bit. The original premise had been 3 kids, college radio show, and the shenanigans and the hijinks and stuff they get into there. But I had to change the premise a little bit for Zoom to be it's the same 3 kids, but they've graduated already. And now they're all living in different places and doing their own thing, but they're continuing their show on YouTube in video podcast form. So it's a fictional podcast, essentially.
Ah, cool. All right. Well, last question. Where can people track you down if they want to find you? Instagram, Facebook, anything like that? Or any of these shows? Yeah.
So I have a personal Instagram. Mm-hmm. It's Instagram at Mediterranean Homesick Blues. And the Sandbox, I have a whole separate one for Sandbox Police because I put full episodes on there on IGTV. And it's just Sandbox Police. That's all. You got to type in. There's no underscores or anything like that. It's just one word. I have a 1+1=2 Facebook page. That's anything and is related to anything and everything that's going on with the show. Sandbox Police has a YouTube channel too. So just search it. So,
okay. Well, and I'll throw the links as well in show notes so people can click on them if they want to have a look. I watched 1+1=2, the trailer you sent. It looks really nice. Like visually, it's really well done. So whoever you had as your director of photography, they did a really good job.
You did, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And of course, best of luck with your film career.
Thank you.